Hi. I did my project on Fragile X syndrome, and the name Fragile X comes from the broken appearance of the X chromosome, which results when the Fragile X gene FMR1 is placed on the chromosome. And this gene is extra large. It's much larger than a normal gene, and it causes a base triplet to be placed such as GGG, GGG, GGG. That's three base triplets. And if a person has Fragile X and they develop a full mutation of it, then they could have 200 or more repeats of the base triplet. But you can also develop a pre-mutation of Fragile X, which it's usually only harmful if it expands inside of the boys are more susceptible to developing the Fragile X syndrome because boys have an X and a Y chromosome, and girls have two X chromosomes. So if the boy's one X chromosome becomes mutated with the Fragile X gene, then he doesn't have another chromosome to fall back on like the girls do. And boys can, if a boy inherits a premutation of the disorder, it can expand and become full size during his early embryonic development. And the chance that the premutation expands is solely based on the number of repeats in the mother's premutation that she passed. Girls can develop Fragile X as well as boys can, but they're just not as susceptible to it. A girl can develop Fragile X if she inherits her mother's full-size mutation, but she can also inherit the premutation similarly to boys, and the premutation will affect her if it expands. And even though if a girl inherits a full mutation, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will negatively affect her. It might not become active ever. And this would be called X inactivation. And this is when every cell in the early embryo inactivates one chromosome and the chromosome no longer produces proteins. So it doesn't necessarily infect the chromosome just becomes inactive and it DNA tests are available to people to see if they have the disorder and to see if they're a carrier of it. Approximately 1 in 260 women carry pre-mutated FMR1 gene, so it's helpful to get the test done. And there are two types of tests. One's called PCR, which is when DNA with FMR1 is isolated and it's copied millions of times, and then the gene is placed in gel gel electrophoresis, and it's pushed down the gel, and the larger fragments stay on the top because they have more DNA in them, so it's harder for them to get pushed through the gel. And the other type of test is the Southern blot test, which is when enzymes cut the DNA on both sides of the gene, and the more repeats, the larger the fragment is that's left. So when geneticists are looking for the disorder, they look for the large fragments that are left in the gel. It's similar to the PCR test. Some symptoms of Fragile X are mental impairment, slight learning disabilities, hyperactivity, hypersensitivity to external stimuli, short attention spans. They might have long, narrow faces and large ears, noses, and foreheads. And the most significant symptom is they have delayed milestones. So if a child turns 2 or 3 and they're not walking or talking properly yet, then that's a sign that they might have Fragile X. And there is no known cure yet for Fragile X. There are current drug therapies available to improve attention span and decrease hyperactivity. Early intervention and special education programs are beneficial and recommended. Some examples are speech and physical therapy. They can also take anti-anxiety drugs. Anxiety is very prevalent among patients with Fragile X. Most parents try to avoid medications if possible, but children with Fragile X physically cannot calm themselves when they become super anxious, so drugs and medicines are they're recommended and they're extremely helpful. And also gene therapy is continuing to develop, which is basically growing proteins in the cells in the brain. And the gene therapy is on the rise, so hopefully it will continue to develop and so it can help patients with Fragile X in the near future.